to start this discussion, which is about board diversity. So if you watch the earlier panel, and there are a lot of discussion around what has broken down. So it's the purpose, values, culture, they're gone missing from the board. So just linking with that, looks like that once you have a breakdown in values, purpose, and culture, weak diversity performance of boards becomes an obvious byproduct of that. Just to share something that we know here in Singapore, among listed companies here, we used to have just 8% of women representation on boards a few years ago. Our local stock exchange set a target, voluntary target, a guideline for companies to take that to 20% by 2020. And the result is around 12%. 2020 is gone. And even there, if you exclude those small companies where women in the family are on the board, or if you're looking at just non-executive independent directors, then that number will fall even further. I hear similar trends around the world. So with that backdrop, this is how we're going to start now. So I'm going to go to each of our panelists here and to introduce yourself, what you do in your organization. And after that, what really board diversity means to you. So I'll start with Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. It's really great to be here today and in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up. In terms of my role at the Good Governance Academy, Chief Executive, really do all the responsibilities, roll my sleeves up, get involved. I do have a largely, well, only male board, which is really quite surprising for an organization that purports to be in governance. And really that's because we're trying to find the right people. So for me, diversity is not only a forced compliance requirement. For me, diversity means that you get the right decision making in the boardroom. You get the right conversations happening. But at the end of the day, once the decision is made, there needs to be consensus and agreement on that decision. So there's not continued diversity outside of the decision-making process. So there is a unification once a decision is made. So for me, diversity is not only diversity in terms of gender, but we also need to see diversity in terms of skills, in terms of mindset, frame of reference, cultural diversity, and very importantly, intergenerational diversity. In today's world, to try and bring that conversation to a point of relevance of the youth of today, of your stakeholders. So absolutely, the decision-making needs to consider that intergenerational gaps that we have in today's world, specifically around technology. You know, gone are the days where the ex-audit partners are immediately automatically made members of the board. You know, those retired audit partners perhaps are not the kind of intergenerational diversity that we need on the board. That being said, the board itself relies on other committees and structures, can rely on committees and structures to make these decisions and to bring diversity in. So all of that diversity doesn't need to live at the board, on the board only, but can be brought in committee structures. So yes, stakeholder representation, employee representation is important in terms of diversity of thinking, but it doesn't mean that those employees have to sit on the board. It can be through a board structure. So for me, that's kind of my 2 cents worth. Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Carolyn. I love your kitchen. So
Yes.
with all these spices behind you, and so it's Sarima, is that your kitchen? It's your kitchen.
It's not, it's just a stock image, but I thought I had to have it to demonstrate I'm in the kitchen with everybody else.
Yeah, that's
our kitchen's not as clean.
All right. So let me, well, I have also a kind of, I want to say this. after hearing what Caroline said about Good Governance Academy's say composition of the board, I just ended up being a board member on a board where it's all male board. And we had just one woman, and she left and has not been replaced. And the last AGM, this question was raised. And it's an embarrassment that I sit on a board which is all male board, but we are all working to find the right candidate and to have that gender diversity. We are good with other diversity. So Paul, that's your brief introduction of your organization, what you do, and what board diversity means to you. And after Paul, then I will go to Gulair.
Okay, thank you very much, Rajesh. Just a bit of background of who I am and what I'm doing. Now, for almost 20 years, I've served on various capacities on over a dozen boards of public listed companies, private companies, non-profit professional or trade organizations, as well as in regulatory committees. Well, I'm a retired CPA practitioner, a fellow member of the Chartered Certified Accountants. I'm also a CPA Australia Chartered, fellow member of fellow member of the CPA Australia, fellow member of the Chartered Secretaries, as well as serve on the board leadership fellow of the National Association of Corporate Directors in the US, as well as a lifetime member of the Accent Pinnacle Asian Corporate Directors. I've also accepted a role in academia as the adjunct industry professor in Sunway University. Now, currently, I serve on two public listed companies. One is SGX listed, several private companies, and an active contributor to nonprofits, including being a global IIRC ambassador of the International Integrated Reporting Council. It was recently merged with SASB to be now known as Value Reporting Foundation. My role in the global IRC, amongst others, is to reach out to members of the Global Network of Director Institutes, or GNDI, of which MACD, the Malaysian Alliance of Corporate Directors, is a member, on a trending corporate reporting framework, including sustainability reporting, among others. GNDI has 25 institutional members globally, with over 150,000 individual members. And the Singapore Institute of Directors is one of our members as well. When I first joined the public listed manufacturing company board almost 20 years ago, 100% of my board colleagues were male. In the port facility management board, which I serve also, we only had one woman on board out of 10. In the international insurance and financial services board, I have served on, 100% was male. We did better with an industry chemical board that had 1/3 women on board. Currently, I serve on an IT services board with 20% women and an international media company with 40% women. Well, I see CSR Works International does the best. We have 75% women on this panel already. As the president of the Malaysian Alliance of Corporate Directors, the MACD, is an independent NGO, non-profit membership organization, we have taken upon ourselves to strongly advocate for merits of board diversity, whether in gender, skill sets, competencies, ethnic groups, to enrich board performance as a whole. As we are compelled to accept and embrace the challenges that thrive in a new normal world, all the more we need to tap into all available resources to remain competitive, right? So the diversity of board members is crucial to avoid groupthink, live and let live attitude, patronages, old boys club, entitlements, political proxies, etc., and to actively debate on and adopting integrated value creation strategies to create values in every aspect of board's role. That's my brief.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. So later we'll come back. In Malaysia, I know that there is a regulatory guidance on having 30% or certain percentage of women on boards. So we'll come back to you on that one.
Okay.
So Gulair, your quick introduction and what board diversity means to you.
Thank you, Rajesh, and especially thank you for inviting me this special kitchen to prepare our courses with the best ingredients. I have quite diversified profile I would like to share with you. First one is I'm academic, more than 30 years, and I'm professor of finance and founding chair of Center for Finance, Governance and Sustainability. I'm chairing my board at my research center and leading national and international project about finance, public governance, and public sustainability and integrated reporting. And second head is I'm founder of many civil society, many NGO in Turkey. And last one is I take an important responsibility as a founding chair of Integrated Reporting Association Turkey. I am trying to increase awareness of, my mission is that with my board member and all members, increasing awareness of integrated thinking and reporting and supporting company get ready for preparing report and disclose non-financial information as well. So on the business side, I'm actively serving as an independent board member and global and local companies. And I'm responsible for internal system, including internal audit, internal control, compliance, and risk management. With my experience, for me, board diversity is not just about, of course, representing representing all dimensions of diversity, including age, range, gender, sexual orientation, religion, and ethnic background. Number tell us just the composition formally, including gender number, not really meaning for me. However, the main thing is cognitive diversity, which also improves the full performance and profitability of the organizations and companies. It is certainly not easy to bring that diversity together and does require much more work. While more progress has been made on the diversity of organization, and especially in leadership role, they can still come to groupthink when people share excessively similar background and perspectives. Once people are hired, chairs need to work to create culture, value, or purpose, and which challenging question can be raised comfortably. A good approach is to create a culture of amplification, especially representative of minority group are encouraged to speak up. Of course, as we all know, the best decisions are made when there is a range of different perspectives and style of thinking which embrace constructive challenge and disagreement. Those I attach much more importance to fostering a culture within the boardrooms. I serve as a chair that will allow for the comfortable expression of different views with an integrated mindset. So I can say that this approach acts a very significant catalyst in strengthening the decision-making process by removing diversity from formally just like showing the people on the board to just prove they are diverse, they have diversified board.
Thank you.
That's my opinion.
Thanks, Khaled. Sarima, tell us about yourself and what board diversity means to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rajesh. Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be on this virtual stage with distinguished MasterChefs colleagues in this plenary session. And thank you, CSR Works, for having me here today. Yeah? So I'm Sarima. I am the chef of sustainability at Sunrise. And before I deep dive into the details of my role, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce you to Sunrise, since for some of you, it's the first time you hear about the company. So for your information, Sunrise is a public listed company, and it is one of the top 10 leading property developers in Malaysia. And we pride ourselves of being pacemakers in creating new integrated townships that fulfill the social, the physical, as well as the spiritual needs of our communities. And back to my role at Sunrise, my current role is to collaborate with the in-house culinary team, I would call them, that is comprising of the design teams, the operations, the planners, as well as the procurement, operation, finance, and so on and so forth, that is comprising the internal stakeholders to develop and plan sustainable menu for the organization. And why I say this is that this is key to ensure that the prosperity and the survivability of our company is at stake. Yeah. And when I mention sustainable menu, I'm referring to a balanced menu. So I would like to take what I call it analogy that a healthy menu is made of a good balance of ingredients, and this comprised of the economic element, which I consider as a protein, the environment, which is the carbohydrate, social, which is a fiber, and finally, yet importantly, is the governance, which is the vitamins and the minerals for the health of our organization. So in a nutshell, the balanced menu is the key to our organization to be future-proof and resilient. Yeah, and I believe personally that board diversity is becoming increasingly important in the present business landscape more than ever than before. Yeah. And in my 20 years work of experience, I found that the best board are also the most diverse boards. And a diverse board can offer a depth and breadth of insights, perspectives, and experienced CEOs. And when I mention diversity, I'm referring to both social diversity as well as professional diversity. And so the diversity that we're talking about is not only about gender, race, ethnicity, and age criteria, but the technical and professional diversity are equally important to increase the perspectives represented. So with the diversity of experience, expertise, and perspectives, I think the diverse line of board members is in a stronger position to plan, to manage your risk, make prudent decisions, and take full advantage of opportunities for the benefit of the company. Thank you. Back to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Sarima. So the best boards are diverse boards that you said. Yeah, so there are a lot of studies, they say this, but still, if you look at statistics, irrespective of markets, you will see that boards are not really as diverse as we will want them to be. So the question here is that why is board diversity important, and who is interested in board diversity? So I'd go to Carolyn. So over to you.
Thank you. That's, so why is board diversity important? And that really is around, for me, it's the decision making. Just a little bit of background. We've just recently, I was involved in the development of an ISO standard, a guidance standard for the governance of organizations. ISO 37000 was published in September 2021. And there we were very clear about that diversity. The diversity really is important for the decision making, making sure that all aspects are considered. So we are humans. We have inherent bias. We've got various lenses that we're wearing, and those lenses are not conscious lenses always. And so to try and bring our biases to the fore, or our different lenses to the discussion, to make sure that we get the best decision making, the best decisions made in the interest of the organization. And in the interest of the organization means that it's not only our opinion around the table. We need to represent the organization and its diversity, and the diversity of the environment that the organization operates in, the stakeholder environment, the social environment, and even the natural environment, and the economic environment. So making sure that we have the right skills to make the right decisions. And that's not always possible with the people around the table. I mean, the size of the board limits us in terms of the amount of diversity we can bring into the discussion, but the premises on which we're making the decisions need to be diverse. And then, of course, very importantly, once we've made a decision, we need to be unified. So diversity, not at the expense of that unity, because the board needs to be unified, but it is all about decision making from my side. You had a second question, but I've spoken a lot about the first. Would you like me to continue, or should we go on to somebody else?
No, Carolyn, you continue. Tell us who is actually interested in diversity.
So I think who is interested in diversity? I think it's today, what we're seeing around the world is the regulators. The regulators want to make sure that organizations are doing the right thing. But honestly, I think about governance versus compliance. For me, compliance is about sending your children to school and getting them to pass the exams. Nobody ever does that. Nobody sends their children to school and says, oh, Johnny, go to school and pass your exams. That's a given. We want you to pass your exams, but more than that, we want you to do your best. So setting out that minimum socially acceptable standard of passing your exam is not what we're wanting. As society, we're wanting our organizations to do their best. And to do their best doesn't always mean the minimum acceptable standard. So don't just pass your exams, actually do your best. And likewise, I think so. Yes, the regulators are interested in setting a minimum socially acceptable diversity indicator, but that's not always what's doing your best. Doing your best needs to be making sure that you're acting in the best interest of the organization and having the diversity of thought that goes into your decision making to get that right. So who is interested? The organization itself should be interested in the diversity that's brought into the board's decision making.
Thank you, Carolyn. Paul, who has the responsibility to ensure board diversity and why? Whether it's the responsibility of regulators, activists, investors, customers, organization itself, who has this responsibility?
Okay, I think the question, who is the responsible? I would think that at the end of the day, the board must lead this initiative, right? See, with increased interest in diversity stem from the investors, shareholders, regulators alike, the need for diverse voices on all aspects of corporation has become very critical, and board do not need to wait to act. As a board must lead, the board must take the onus to take on themselves a mandate to unlock the organization potential and set the tone at the top. As such, diversity is a moral imperative as well as a legal mandate in some jurisdiction. At the same time, diversity is also a strategic imperative. I view that the high-performing board is one that has a holistic understanding of its organization and its industry. This involves understanding of every stakeholder, shareholders, consumers, suppliers, contractors, and more. Put it simply, corporation will not be able to build or maintain a successful enterprise that yields sustainable long-term stakeholder value without bringing a greater variety of perspectives to the board. So we do not wait. The board does not have to wait for the regulatory framework. In the free enterprise, it's really the expression of the board, to decide the best course for the company, with all the other aspects of compliance and all the other aspect of the externalities, to chart themselves the destiny of the company. When the regulators come in, it's because the board is not doing its role. So if the board is doing its role, I don't think that there should be any reservation of creating value for the company, which is the role of the board. So to your question, yes, the board is responsible.
All right, so it looks like that the boards have not taken that responsibility seriously. That's why around the world, we have boards which are not diverse. So the question here is then, why is that so? So what are the reasons? What are the factors for a board or for an organization not really paying attention to diversity? So let me ask our two women members here. So I'll start with Sarima. What's your perspective? What do you see around, say, in Malaysia and other places? Why do you think the boards, they don't have, what reasons for poor diversity or poor diversity?
I think just a trend towards enforcing board diversity is actually growing. I think we have to admit that. In fact, it is facilitated through regulatory. Like for example, in Malaysia, is governed by Bursa Malaysia, and adoption of the best practices, meaning that even though it's not regulated, but there are corporate citizens who are wanted to do this and adopt best practices. And I think this is moving towards a common objective that all of us, corporate citizens, wanted to generate high values to our organization. And I think the current pace may be a little bit slower than what we're expecting it to be. But in my opinion, more countries are already pushing towards regulatory enforcement, including Malaysia. So in my opinion, there is a positive development in pushing diversity agenda at board. However, there must be a lot more to be done based on the maturity of the country as well as the maturity of the organization. So that's my opinion, Rajesh.
Thank you, Sarima. So Gule, well, what's happening on your view? What was the reason for poor diversity performance of most boards? What is stopping them?
Rajesh, actually, we have to actually talk about who is expecting to see more diversified board, who is get benefit from this. I think we have to catch this main point. So, board, main role of the board represent, formulate, and fulfill the interest of expectation of not only shareholders, but also stakeholders of the company. Because now stakeholders expecting to see more information, more transparent, more honest performance, more honest explanation from the companies, especially pandemic and climate crisis, social justice crisis, and global economic crisis are serious challenges for facing organizations. So stakeholders expecting to see them, and not only stakeholders, but also regulators. They try to align with their company with a global world. As you know, the COP26 just completed the last month. So most of the countries already committed to just disclose the information about climate change. So now regulators pushing the companies to disclose more information about ESG. So this is the most important motivation for them. And also, of course, organization itself have to provide a better performance for the stakeholders, but also investors and potential investors. So it's because of this increasing expectation regarding integration of environmental, social, and governance issues, and corporate business strategy and quality of the reporting are changing dramatically. Therefore, duty of the board has expanded to include the management of ESG risk and opportunities, as well as with integrated approach. So at the front of this, the requirement of these changes, the diversity. So diversity is the board is now much more than the nice to have, not only for developed country, but also developing country, because of the stakeholder expectation and question. That's why diversity on the board is now key for ensuring sustainable long-term performance and quality leadership. And if you see the recent study examining the correlation between board diversity and companies' revenue, in short, companies with diverse board tended to do better during this time of transition. This also indicates that better company performance correlated roughly with increased level of gender, age, and racial diversity in the composition of board of directors. And another report regarding another reports, companies with more diverse executive teams were also top financial performance. So we lesson learned from latest crisis and latest situation. So that's why diversity is not only about the luxury and nice to have, and that's why the organization itself, all stakeholders, regulatory body, very much interested in the response to see responsible people on the board, not only, for example, adding few women to show well-diversified board. They would like to see what is their expertise, what is their contribution for the company. So that's why nowadays, not only a developed country, but also developing country, board composition very much important for all stakeholders. So we can see the result also many studies, and also this expectation related with financial performance, not only non-financial performance. It should be integrated, as we know. So company provide also more integrated performance, financial and non-financial, with the better board composition in our conference team with a better ingredients. We can cook that best.
Okay, let's cook better with better ingredients. We need more ingredients in the boardroom. Well said. So I also want to ask our audience, if you have any questions, it's time for Q&A very soon. So if you have any questions, please type your questions in the Q&A box, and we will be very happy to take some of the questions. Before that, you know, Carolyn, in the beginning, you mentioned intergenerational diversity among boards. And then it's not just gender. So we are also talking about, you know, other issues which are more sensitive in certain cultures and certain places like LGBTQ and so on. But let's first talk about intergenerational. So having an intergenerational board, does it mean having younger board members? And what are the challenges in doing that, in recruiting, finding those people, and what challenges one can foresee?
Yeah, very good question, because in today's move into technology and leveraging technology as a competitive advantage for all organizations, really, and moving into areas such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, the board members themselves, and we don't have a history of that. I'm fortunate in that I do have an IT background, a technology background. And let me maybe just give a personal example. When I started being appointed to boards, or let me start even before that, when I was a chief information officer or an IT executive, there was no board understanding in terms of what we were trying to do with technology. So it was really considered a cost or a financial aspect, unless there was maybe a marketing advantage to it. So it was really very operational. Now we're trying to move into a world where technology is a strategic enabler. It is also a strategic risk, or there's a threat and opportunities around it. And we have board members who are not equipped, who don't have the skill set or the fundamental training that went behind it. So we are unable, if we don't have that intergenerational representation. Specifically, I'm just talking one example is technology, and have that discussion around the deep understanding of just the use of technology. I mean, how many times have you walked into a boardroom where there's a discussion around the table about the grandchildren so helping with the cell phone or the iPad? But that's not the only intergenerational issue around, the need for intergenerational diversity. It's not only in technology, but it's also in the changing perceptions. We see that just with the Greta Thunberg movement, right? There's a young generation that's got behind her that has a different mindset. That generation has a different approach to the generation that we see on our boards today. So definitely is that age differentiation. Now, bringing a new board member, a younger board member who perhaps doesn't have the same kind of thinking, and there's a very nice level of maturity model that I like to use, and that's from Learn to Lead. And Learn to Lead talks about going from a subject matter expert to being a community leader, to being a tribal leader, which is really an executive level. But when you're sitting on a board, you have to be a legacy builder. I like using those terms. A legacy builder has a very different mindset from a tribal leader. So a tribal leader is used to fighting for their budget, fighting for their piece of the pie in organizational terms. But a legacy builder has a very different mindset in terms of priorities. Now, trying to get a younger person who doesn't have the years of experience to leapfrog from being a subject matter expert into being a legacy builder needs a lot of coaching, mentorship, guidance, and bringing that decision-making, that perspective to the board, where a board they have to be legacy builders as opposed to fighting for my piece of the pie. So intergenerational diversity brings its own issues, brings its own difficulties. So perhaps considering whether this intergenerational diversity should be on the board itself or leveraging committees of the board. So a right level of authority, guidance directly to the board level from a broader spectrum of understanding that their perspective is as tribal leaders or is as a specific, subject matter expertise, rather than having to force that person into considering legacy building, in which case perhaps there's maybe psychological insecurity of having to think at that basis while bringing your subject matter expertise. So lots of considerations. You need to have the right board to bring the right decision making, not just ticking the box to say we're diverse.
Thank you, Carolyn. I like that, legacy builder. So I think that's a very nice way to put it. And just to mention what happened just last couple of days, the youngest prime minister of a certain country going into all-night party until 4 a.m. in the morning after being a close contact of a positive case, COVID-19 positive case. So that's something that comes with intergenerational. I can see it's something similar, perhaps a challenge happening at the board level. So Chef Elaine, do we have any burning question from the audience?
Well, yes, I'm not on mute. We are running a little bit behind time, but perhaps one very quick question with very quick answers. I mean, one of the things we haven't touched on is it's fine to have a diverse board, but how do you ensure that all these diverse voices are heard in the boardroom? I mean, maybe the chairman just expects the women board members to make the tea and serve the biscuits.
Good question. So yeah, so how do you make them heard? So quick answers, right? So let's go Sarima, and then the next I will go to Paul, and then Guler, and finally Carolyn. Just a brief, quick, short answer, please.
I think, Rajesh, in my opinion, is very simple. Respect is one thing that we need to respect and be able to listen on what the other board members have to say. And we have to remember that every board members have their respective professional skills that they bring with them. So basically, when you talk about their expertise, their voice must be heard, and we need to be open to ensure that we take into consideration to everyone's input. So that's my point on this.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, we're talking about diversity. It's something now become a cliche that we just talk about it. But have you ever defined it? I think whenever that we want to talk about a discussion, we should lay it down on the table. What is the definition to each board member diversity means? Some maybe you consider diversity as an identity. You're talking about gender, you're talking about race, ethnicities, right? The other part of the diversity, you're talking about skill-based. Skill-based such as professional experience, and the industry-specific experience. So where I'm coming from is this, a comprehensive definition of diversity is very important. Lay it down on the table so that we help board members to understand it and we define it together. And we put a framework around it. If necessary, even have a committee to talk about diversity issues, all right? But normally diversity issue is delegated to the nomination committee, right? But it could be a much more specific subset of it. So what I think is very important is that let's define what board diversity means rather than assume everybody understands it. Right.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that's where we started. What board diversity means to you. So I think we are running out of time. We don't really have time. So unless it's just one line answer. So from Carolyn and Guler, just one line.
Rajesh, should I continue?
Yes, Guler.
Yes,
Yeah,
I just wanted to say we should talk about more than diversity. We should talk about more inclusivity. Inclusivity is generally missing, and for improving board diversity, developing a real culture of the inclusivity along with diversity is crucial, I can say very shortly. And before end of this session, I should say how crucial and necessary a diversified and balanced diet for a health human life. It is equally essential that shaping the future of the corporation, the board is well diversified, inclusive enough to match the expectation all these stakeholders for health, for corporate performance.
Thanks, Gulay. So Carolyn, just last, so the question was, how do you have somebody on the board, but you know, you have one woman and nobody hears her. So how do you make that one person heard in the board? Just one line, what's your take on that?
Like the board sets the tone for the organization, so the chairman of the board sets the tone for the board. If you don't have the right chairman, you're not going to get the right outcome. And it is about the respect. Thank
you, Carolyn. So we have come to the end of this session. So I really want to thank Carolyn, Paul, and Gulay and Sarima for your time and for all the spices that you brought with you and your lovely kitchen, Carolyn.